Hi everyone, and welcome to Inverter Always. I'm Dana, and today is the first episode in a new controls series where we're going to talk about all of the different controllers available for the Daikin Mini-split and VRV products. This series is going to include controller features, installation, how to use your new controller, and technical setup videos for all of the controllers available on the Daikin Mini-split and VRV platform. Now, let's jump right in. So let me just start off by saying that Daikin offers a whole family of different controls options for both the Daikin Mini-split and VRV products, each which have their own unique capabilities, which makes selecting a controller really come down to the application and the user's preference. So in today's video, we are going to be talking about the features of the Daikin Navigation Remote Controller, or Nav Controller for short. The Nav Controller part number is BRC1E73. There are some older versions available, BRC1E72 and BRC1E71. But the latest version, at least as of 2020, is the BRC1E73. Now, the Nav Controller has a lot of different features unique to it, but also a lot of flexibility in different controls applications, which makes it one of my favorite controllers to use. First of all, it's going to be a flush mount style controller, which means you can screw it directly to the wall without the requirement of any sort of installation box. Then your controller is just going to snap in to the back plate once you mount it. Now, the Nav Controller is compatible with certain indoor models, but not all of them. You'll see on the back that there is a P1, P2 connection terminal, which means it can only connect to Daikin VRV indoor units, SkyAir P1, P2 indoor units. Not all SkyAir indoor units use P1, P2. There are a few 4-wire versions out there that use S21, which is also what most of the mini-split indoor units use. So on some indoor units that do have P1, P2 terminals, the Nav Controller will work. But you cannot connect a Nav Controller, at least not yet, to indoor units that have an S21 connection terminal. Now, there is a new Nav Controller in the works that's not out yet that is supposed to integrate to S21, but again, at least as of right now, 2020, that is not available. So today we're going to be focusing on the Nav Controller on P1, P2 connections. So before we get too far into this video, let's talk about how this Nav Controller generally works. In order to turn on or off your indoor unit, you simply press the on-off button. When your unit is on, a green LED will illuminate at the on-off button. If you want to change the mode of operation, you simply press the mode button, and it will change your unit from heating to cooling, or vice versa, or just put your indoor unit into the fan-only mode. If you're too cold in the space and you'd like to increase the set point, simply press the red up arrow, and it will increase the active set point. If you are too warm, on the other hand, and you'd like to decrease the set point in the space, you simply press the blue down arrow, and that will decrease the active set point. Now, if at any point you just want to change the fan speed, you can do that by simply pressing the fan speed button. Now, in the middle of the controller, there is a menu OK button, and it serves two purposes. The menu button is how you access the menu, which we'll talk about shortly. While you're in the menu, if you change any of the settings, in order to save those settings, you need to press the OK button. It's the same button, it just acts with two purposes. Think of it as your enter button. Now, once you're done, at any point, if you need to escape back to the main screen, you simply press the cancel button. And that's all there is to it. Now, when you're selecting a Nav Controller, you do have the option of connecting this to one indoor unit, or you can connect this one Nav Controller to up to 16 indoor units. Now, most of the time, at least in a residential application, you are not going to connect this Nav Controller to more than one unit because When you have multiple indoor units connected to a single nav controller, they will be operated as if they were one group, which means they're all going to have the same on-off command, the same set point that they're all going to operate to achieve, the same fan speed, the same mode of operation. Typically, when you connect multiple indoor units to a single nav controller, it's because in a commercial application, you have multiple indoor units in one big room. A conference room, a computer lab at a school, a large classroom, or maybe an auditorium, a banquet hall. You get the idea. Anytime you're in a residential application, you're generally not going to have multiple indoor units in the same room, which means you do not want multiple indoor units to be on one nav, because now each of those rooms are going to be controlled as if they were one room. Now, one of the other really cool things about the nav controller is it gives you the ability to change where the indoor unit controls temperature from. Now, on a mini-split that only has a handheld controller, without a nav controller, you're stuck using the return air thermistor for control. And this lacks the tight room temperature control we're all used to with conventional thermostats. On a VRV system and mini-splits that have P1, P2 connected, we now have the ability to sense temperature from a thermistor built into the controller. This also adds in programming that allows us to tighten up the thermo on-off deadbands, which means we can now call for heat within 1 degree or call for cooling within 1 degree of the set point, and then it also shuts off the heating and cooling if for any reason we get 1 degree past the set point. So you get a much tighter level of control, all from what this controller can offer. The nav controller also offers single and dual set point capabilities. So if you're the user that prefers to have auto heating and cooling to 70 degrees, you can absolutely do that. Or if you'd prefer to have dual set points, heat to 70, cool to 72, you can do that as well. And what's really cool about VRV systems specifically is I can have one nav controller set up one way, let's say dual set point, while I have a different nav controller connected to a different indoor unit set up for single set point. So you get a lot of flexibility in how you set up your particular application. Alright, you guys, so as we get into the menu settings and different configuration options of the Navigation Remote Controller, I thought it would be best if I showed you this next batch of settings on a working nav controller. This nav controller is at my house in my garage, connected to a VRV wall mount unit. So the menu of the nav controller gives the user a full list of complementary features to play with, and in order to get into the menu, you simply press the menu button. From here you can do a lot of different things, and what's really cool about the nav controller is that it acts like a window into the indoor unit. So if there's a feature that's not available on the indoor unit, that feature will not populate on the nav controller. I particularly like this because other manufacturers will still show you all of the settings and features, but then you just can't use them. And I don't really like that. I'd rather, if something isn't available, to not have it show up at all. So just quickly going through the main menu, the airflow direction is for indoor units that have no ductwork, so a wall mount or a cassette unit that has louvers. This selection airflow direction gives us the ability to change the direction of our louvers. Now, the schedule on the nav controller is a fully programmable schedule. I can do a different schedule every day of the week. I can have a weekday weekend schedule. I can change Saturday and Sunday, pretty much do whatever I want with the schedule, just like I would on any other fully programmable thermostat. The off timer is not something we use very often. However, in some circumstances, if you're going to come in after hours, say this is a commercial application in your office, and you want to turn on the unit but only operate the unit for, let's say, 2 hours, and then have the unit automatically turn off after that, enabling the off timer will then automatically shut off the unit anytime you turn it on after the allotted time. I can change my nav controller from Celsius to Fahrenheit. The North American market, United States, has Fahrenheit as the default, but if you have an application that needs Celsius, or if you are from Canada and you prefer Celsius, that is totally fine. The maintenance information you'll see pops up with the latest error code. This is helpful for diagnostic purposes. And if we go to the second page here, configuration changes the display, and the last few items have to deal with the clock and the calendar and your language. The current settings is very helpful for diagnostic purposes because this tells us everything that's currently set in the main menu. Now, what's really cool about the Daikin Nav controllers, and I believe I already said this once, but they are a window into the indoor unit, which means from the Nav controller we can access all of the indoor unit programming. So there's this thing called field settings, and the field settings provide us the ability to change how the factory logic behaves during certain circumstances. And so when I get into a service technician menu and I go down to the field settings, and we're not going to talk about any of these settings specifically in this video, I just want you to see what they look like. The technician can go in and they can set up each nav controller exactly how that room needs to behave. So for example, let's say I have a wall mount installed in a bedroom and I have other indoor units installed throughout the house. When the indoor unit reaches the set point and it goes to a thermo off condition, which means it's no longer calling for heating or cooling, we can tell that indoor unit to do something. We can tell it to stop calling 1 degree after it reaches the set point, or 2 degrees. So we can change that thermo on-off deadband and tighten it up. We can tell the fan to go to low, which is an internally low fan speed that is not selectable at the nav controller. And the other thing that we can do that's really cool is we can actually tell the fan to shut completely off. So in that bedroom where the indoor unit is satisfying the space very quickly, but other indoor units are still heating or cooling the space around the house, that bedroom's fan, we could tell it to just shut off. So that way it doesn't accidentally overcool or overheat the space. And what's even cooler is I can set up the fan to turn off or change speeds in heat mode and do something totally different in the cooling mode. Now, if we back out one menu here and we go back to the service settings, and we're not going to go through every single one of these in this video because these settings are designed for the technician to get into, not the end user. And getting into these settings definitely will affect how the system operates and behaves, and we don't want things to get messed up from users who may not know what they're doing. So for the technicians that are in the service settings screen, there's a really neat feature that you can enable when you have users that are button pushers. And then I suppose for management in a commercial office space or a school, this is a very neat feature for you guys, because if you have students or office employees that are button pushers, then you have the ability to lock out any of these buttons that you see on the nav controller. If I don't want somebody to turn their controller off, I want it on all the time, because that's how VRF's designed to operate. I can lock out the on-off button, and to do that I just go down to prohibit function, and that's going to give me the ability to lock out any of these buttons. Now I don't have to lock out the buttons, I can also just lock out certain modes of operation. Let's say I don't want a particular user in an application to change the mode from cooling to heating. Maybe my unit is in a server room. I want it to be in cooling all the time. I can go to prohibit function and I can lock out all of the modes except for the cooling mode, which means every time I push the mode button, nothing happens. It's always going to be in cooling. When it comes to servicing or diagnosing a communicating heat pump system, it can definitely be overwhelming, especially without the needed information to see what's happening inside the system. Tools are available which gives the technician all of the system information that they need, such as pressures and temperatures throughout the refrigerant network. However, the Nav controller offers a very cool feature that gives the technician a window into the indoor unit they're connected to see what that particular indoor unit is doing in order to make possibly a diagnosis without having to get tools out of their truck. By accessing indoor unit status in the maintenance menu, which is another technician menu that we're not going to talk about specifically today, except for indoor unit status, the technician has a window to see thermistor data, fan data, expansion valve position on an indoor unit manufactured after 2015. on some of the older models, like the one I have here in my garage. Unfortunately, the older models can't push forward this information, but anything manufactured after 2015 will. And what's really cool about this is that, for example, let's say I have 3 indoor units on a job and one of them isn't heating properly. I can go to that indoor unit and I can go into the indoor unit status screen and I can see what the temperatures are entering and leaving that indoor unit, along with the expansion valve position. And using the information here, I should be able to at least get a glance at if the problem is unit related or system related. It doesn't give you everything in the whole system, but it does give you information on that particular indoor unit. And if you get that information from all of the indoor units installed, you should be able to determine whether or not the problem is coming from a particular indoor unit that maybe has a bad expansion valve or a restriction somewhere in its line set, or if the problem is coming from the entire system. A real world example of this, we had a job that was installed and none of the indoor units were providing heat. And when you go to the indoor units, the expansion valve position, even though nothing shows up on this nav, the expansion valve position of that job site was 2,000 pulses, which means it was wide open. And the TH2 and TH3, liquid and gas pipe thermistor temperatures, were both the same as the room temperature, telling us there was no refrigerant flow, which typically indicates you have a restriction. We would have argued that maybe it was a bad expansion valve, except that this was happening on all 3 indoor units installed. So when it came down to it, we were able to track back the restriction to the first branch in the piping network. And when we cut open that gas pipe, there was a penny lodged inside the Y branch. So just, by using Nav controllers, we were able to determine that there was a system-wide problem. None of the units were getting hot gas, which means it was probably coming somewhere between the outdoor unit and the first branch. And then at that point, we just had to take temperature readings of the pipe until we found where that temperature change was caused by the restriction. Cut open the pipe and boom, there's a penny inside the ref net. That was a lot of information to get through, but the settings that we've discussed are just a few of the many features available in the Nav controller. When it comes to selecting a controller for your heat pump system, the Nav controller is definitely not the most prettiest controller in the bunch, but from a functional perspective, it does an incredible job of controlling each indoor unit zone of a heat pump system, while also providing the user many flexible options for each unique application. Well guys, that's it for today. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button below. It really helps out the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you don't miss out on any future content. Thank you so much for watching Inverter Always. I hope you have an awesome day.